coming out of the block of like meditation, of grounding, an interesting thread that we saw with the biggest block of songs on this playlist is some really personal stuff.
Yeah.
Where music served as kind of an awakening, where it sort of shifted our perspective 10 degrees left at different points in our lives. Music really was the shaping force, like, for us as people. And so there are 7 songs in this next block. And I just want to read them out loud because on paper, like, you're not going to see.
No one else has ever put
this sequence of songs
together.
is not happening anywhere. So Things Going On from the first Skynyrd record, Living for the City by Stevie Wonder from Intervisions, Yellow Spider by mewithoutYou. And I would love to hear what Aaron Weiss would think of being placed right after Stevie Wonder on a playlist. But I dig it. And then from mewithoutYou, Into Glass in the Trees by Dead Poetic, which again is not appearing on any protest playlist anywhere. Then Paper Planes by M.I.A. Amazing. Probably the catchiest song on this whole playlist. Right into Masters of War by Bob Dylan, sneakily probably the heaviest song on this playlist. Into one of our collective favorite songs, War Pigs by Sabbath.
One thing that sticks out to me here, I think, is that each of these, we could probably boil it down and say the reason these are kind of related to us or in the same thread is each of them kind of has this, oh shit moment.
Yep.
You're kind of rolling along and getting it, and then a particular phrase, change, aspect, lyric, anything goes, oh. And it becomes something much more dense and serious and heavy-handed almost, but in a way that reorients you. And, you've described these as kind of moments of clarity and growth. And I think, at least for me, that's an appropriate way to describe each one of these. They each have this moment of, oh, I've got something I don't think I understood that I need to pay a little bit more attention to.
More specifically, I feel like, because we grew up in the same hometown, right? Like, sort of everywhere USA suburban type of town. I felt like I had been lied to by the people around me and the adults. And this was like a transmission from the front lines of the real shit.
Yeah.
Especially with the first couple, like with Skynyrd especially, where I asked my dad when I was very young what a ghetto was at like 4 years old. And I can still remember the shift in his body language when he had to explain that to me because of the band that did Sweet Home Alabama, But he also had to explain George Wallace and his politics and why that song was a thing. So
yeah,
Skynyrd was like deceptively leftist. Like I miss the leftist rednecks of the 70s. We're trying to bring that back, I think, honestly.
Between them and Johnny Cash, we're going to have some conversations about this. But yeah, and the Skynyrd song is a perfect example too of the singular line or two that really changes it. And for me, like, one of the great examples in this song is you're being asked, have you ever lived in the ghetto?
Yeah, not driven through it.
Yeah, not are you aware of it? Not have you heard about it on the news? And I think that's it's a really big 2020 theme for me. It's like,
well, and then the next line is, have you ever felt that cold wind blow? Like, have you felt the physical pain of these people? And they knew it because they were from the wrong side of the tracks in Jacksonville, right? So it's candidly, it's more compelling to me, or it was when I was young, because they were people that looked like me. And like, I grew up in a middle class family that came from poor white folks. And so I could see a lot of myself in that. And that's what's insane to me about Skynyrd fandom of now, is it's been collapsed into like a Reaganite caricature of whatever being from the South is supposed to be. I remember the more nuanced, bitter Southerner version of Skynyrd. And so that's why I hold on to songs like this that are like, you're right, they put you in the shoes of, you're in this situation and the people up there in Washington don't care about you at all. I think all they do is sit up there and get high. Not the good kind.
That's right. Not the good kind. I also love that they take a shot at NASA in here. That's honestly, that was one of my favorite underhanded, like, and by the way, we're spending so much money going to the moon. Can we give some people some money to eat?
But if you take that and extrapolate it to 2020, it's like, why is our defense budget 15x the next 10 countries combined? And yet we're going to send kids back to school, and like make sure that they all get COVID and die, especially in the cities.
Oh, Kyle, I have an answer for this. We'll talk about it when we talk about Ronald Reagan. Was that intense? Good. Good. So
I'm trying to figure out which distant cousin I'm going to show the Ronald Reagan clip to.
Merry Christmas, everybody. A tape of this is in your stocking.
Get me a sweater vest.
So from Lynyrd Skynyrd to Stevie Wonder, a transition that is probably local to us as well. But like
talking about the same thing though.
Totally. And before we talk too much about that one, like I just want to call out, we'll probably be talking a little bit less about the specifics of the music
for this one,
how it was recorded in these concepts. But Stevie played all the instruments on this track himself. Everything you hear is him, drums, synthesizer, whatever.
So spoiler, we are going, when we get back to the album format, it is on our roadmap to talk about Intervisions, because early to mid 70s Stevie is like still one of the greatest runs in American music history.
For sure.
And this also had Higher Ground on it. I can't remember what else was on Intervisions, but this is definitely my favorite Stevie record. This is like peak weird chord changes. And this song's what, like 7, 8, 9 minutes? It
takes a minute.
It's longer. And it's got the whole interlude where the black dude is getting wrongfully arrested and they throw him in the jail cell and they call him the N-word. And that was like, whew. I don't think that was the first time that I heard it, but it was the first time that I heard it in the context of a cop saying it, certainly. Yeah. And it was like, who, you get that feeling like somebody else's lived experience is very different from my own. That's not something that I've ever had to deal with.
Nope. Never
had a positive police interaction, but it's never been that bad.
No. But it's incredible how much that story is just stop and frisk.
Yeah.
Things don't change. Like, yeah. For me, the line that really changes me on that song is, I hope you hear inside my voice of sorrow and it motivates you to make a better tomorrow. I think even just a theme for myself and for anyone else who might need to hear it, I think that thread of, have you ever lived in the ghetto? Like, do you know what this feels like? No. And my job is not to try to know what that feels like, because it won't. My job is to take people at face value when they say, this is my sorrow, this is what really happens to me, and turn that into something, a better tomorrow, literally, to reorient myself towards creating better systems that don't result in that.
But then by contrast, the chord progression and the song structure neither of them really resolve.
Yeah.
And it leaves it kind of open-ended at the end, like, here's the story. We definitely haven't fixed it for a long time, and there's still a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. Stevie's chord selections and changes do a really good job of mirroring that, like, not quite melancholy, not quite hopeful, not quite resigned, but not quite all in. Stevie Wonder's chords feel a lot like watching Donald Glover's Atlanta to me, where it's like there's probably a German or Japanese word for it that's the center point between a lot of feelings, some of them positive, some of them negative. It's very Zen-like is the wrong word, but it's got like a holy type of thing where it forces you to think a little more deeply, and that's why I think Stevie is one of the greatest of all time.
No argument here.
So then the next two are extremely personal to you. They're two that I have really no relationship with. So I'm interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, both of them at different points hit me with these kind of super dense emotional points that help me to think through something. It's almost like those moments where you like pre-realize something. It's like you need a moment to think through it, but somehow your body has gotten the gist of it ahead of time. So Yellow Spider is part of, I love Me Without You so much. I really do hope that we spend time going over a record just so we can talk about that band and the joy that they have brought into the world. But Yellow Spider is part of what is known as the Spider Trilogy. So 3 Spider themed songs. But the whole idea here is Aaron Weiss is talking about, like, the songs are like Yellow Spider, I think it's Green Spider, and Brownish Spider are like the 3. And what he's looking at is the way that the spider and the leaf themselves, they have the same color and the same appearance, and they both have a cycle of life. And essentially, this was his way of starting to describe the yellow spider, the yellow leaf are snapshots of a life that has a beginning and an end. It evolves. And there's nothing we can do about the fact that the leaf will change color and die. The spider will change color because it's mapped against the leaf, and it will die. And we have the ability to have this beautiful outlook on the fact that things will always evolve and they will always die. And our recognition of that is what makes it simplistic and beautiful. But he talks about, yellow spider, yellow leaf confirms my deepest held belief. And it was a thing that's taken me a long time to kind of process, because it itself, that idea doesn't really resolve. Like, your deepest held belief is this understanding of something that you haven't experienced yet. I will die, and that makes me meaningful. But I also don't understand it from the aspect that I've never not existed before that I can remember.
Right.
And then when he gets
which makes it so the opposite of everything else about human existence, right? Like the faith that there's something after, or there's a comfort or whatever. Everything else in your life is based on evidence in some way, right? Like, how do I feel about the beach or the mountains or pasta or whatever? It's like you don't know until you know. And we have such strong feelings about the one thing that we can never truly know in the world. And the vibe of the song and the abstraction that Aaron Weiss takes on, I think, really captures that paradox really well.
Yeah. And by the time he gets to the final cycle of it in Brownish Spider, I mean, he's saying basically the spider no longer exists. The leaf no longer exists. I no longer exist. My beliefs no longer exist. And to me, that was just a really good. It's so earnest and genuine. And
that's the thing that us talking about it can't capture about this band.
That's right.
Is like there's a piercing, different from the kind of emotional immaturity of like a lot of the emo stuff for me.
Yeah.
There's like a world weariness. Aaron Weiss reminds me of the character of The Giver, where he has all the knowledge and he like almost doesn't know how to share it with anyone else without like explicitly passing it down. So it's weird and cryptic a lot of the time, but he like feels everything, and you can feel that when you listen to their music, and especially when you see them live. So they're one of those bands that, like, when shows come back, I really hope that somebody who like only likes 2 or 3 of these songs is like, maybe I'll go check out a Me Without You show. That would, if one person tells us that, when all this is said and done, I will be so happy.
Yep. Do it in 2020.
And
it's the last year.
Yeah, right. Well, I look forward to potentially, hopefully the world doesn't end before the rescheduled Furnace Fest, so that we can see Me Without You
for that. So trying to really contain myself about Me Without You, but that's what sticks here in this moment of clarity and growth. After that is another band that kind of came up in that similar tooth and nail adjacent scene, Dead Poetic.
What a time to be alive.
I know. I won't apply that same level of earnestness to this band writ large, although they've been a really cool band over the years. But Glass in the Trees is really specific to, I mean, I really can't do it justice without listening to the whole song pretty intently. But the story of it is that the singer, the lyricist, it's telling a real life story of sitting in the passenger seat in a car with someone with whom he has some level of unresolved tension, discussion. There was a thing. Mm-hmm. There's an unsettled thing. And they get in such a terrible car wreck where the driver dies that Glass in the Trees is the windshield became embedded in the trees because of how like high speed and how dramatic this whole crash was. But this song specifically, not only is it incredibly well written, but it really takes you through. There's this kind of bridge that takes you through as if they stopped the moment. They like Zach Morris'd the whole thing and everything is paused. I have to bring levity to it because otherwise it's so intense.
Yeah. It's
like,
heavy.
He draws out the sensation of saying slow down, and like that there was this moment of realization, and they really draw it out. And then at the end, it's really impactful to me because he comes back and he's dealing with, and he never resolves, the amount of shame and guilt and just unresolved tension that results in, I had a thing and I knew I had a thing that I needed to resolve, and I watched my chance to resolve this go away and it'll never come back. And he talks through, he kind of builds to this moment where he says, I'm not worthy of grievance and I did nothing to prevent this. And he even goes on to talk about he's standing around the grave of this person and says, I could have caused this. I don't know. And to me, this connects with this moment in time where it says we don't really know what actions we're supposed to take. And we don't really know when we'll experience the shame of not doing something we know that we should have done. But nevertheless, there is a moment that we can foresee in our own future where we know I didn't do what I should have done.
Yep.
And we can see it and we can make a change that prevents that future. And so even right now, if there's something that is drawing you towards taking action about something that you see, it's worth really wrestling with, am I feeling that now is the right time? Because now might actually be the right time to take care of something important.
And I think that's also an interesting kind of angle to take with the people in your life who are reluctant or even antagonistic toward, like, I mean, let's call it what it is, being on the right side of history.
Yeah.
They have the privilege for it not to matter to them, or they're openly hostile for whatever reason. I think having an interesting conversation around with a parent or an uncle or a cousin or whatever, around, at the end of your life, what difference is it going to make that you like harbored this feeling that corroded you in some way? So that's a total extrapolation from what this song is actually talking about.
Well, yeah.
But it is a relationship. Your relationship with the world is similar to your relationship with like your people. So I think it's important to think about like, what is even the point? Like, what do you even gain from holding on to that feeling in your heart?
Yeah.
This song also reminded me a lot of, I was very briefly into Alexis on Fire toward the end there.
This is a 44 caliber love letter straight from my heart.
After that.
Yeah, I know.
I started liking all those bands when their fans stopped liking all of them. Like them, Poison the Well, Thrice, when they started like trying to grow up. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I love this now. It doesn't all sound the same. And their fans were all like, not for me anymore. By the way, those last two Poison the Well records are like the greatest thing. Still ahead of their time in the scene, and I hope we'll cover them at some point. But there's an Alexis on Fire song called This Could Be Anywhere in the World that I think is the macro version of this micro song. The chorus is, this city is haunted by the ghosts of broken homes. And the melody is very similar. Like, it is haunting. It is spooky. It's like the feeling of standing over somebody's grave and wondering if you'd said everything that you'd wanted to say to that person. If you've ever lost somebody, like, like, whoa, if I'd known that time was the last time that I would see that person, I would have maybe done one more thing differently. And like, that is about the most wretching feeling that you can feel as a person. So thinking about that in the context of this moment is like don't leave anything unsaid, just in the way you express your humanity.
Yes. Ugh. I mean, not to be over earnest, but it is never a bad moment to convey your kindness. If you want to be kind to someone, speak up. If you want to do something for them, do it. Okay? If you're not sure, ask questions. You'll never regret that part of it.
And my favorite part of you saying that is, having known you 15 years, all the people who know you now are like, yeah, that's Cliff. He's like, he's a really kind guy. But like, you're also the person that used to like fight people with almost no provocation. And
I learned quick.
I always think of combative Cliff first, and I have to remind myself, like, no, he's kinder. Like we're both better people now. We've evolved, like more you than me, but we've both evolved and we've softened because we've had to, because it doesn't make sense to carry that kind of corrosive behavior.
You get nothing
anymore.
out of questioning whether someone else deserves the kind thing you're about to say.
Right.
No one benefits.
Right. I mean, still punch Nazis and all that. And we'll get into that. But
Hey, boy, finger guns. Now they're live on broadcast.
anyway, let's go on to the next
Paper
one.
planes.
Real tonal shift. And again, like the best pop song, I think, on this whole playlist.
Yep.
So talk about your orientation to M.I.A. and to this song in particular. Because you've been trying to get us to do an M.I.A. record for a hot minute. Also, I think this is the closest we'll ever get to covering any Diplo-related thing.
For sure. I mean, M.I.A. is an MC that's unapologetically herself and has been the entire time. For me, Paper Planes is worth drawing out here because, one, it's the best pop song on any of these playlists. But also, like, it's a good moment of realization of what this song is about, contrasted with the cultural acceptance of it in the way that we viewed it, because it was like the feel good hit of the summer in like 2007 or whatever, and everyone's running around like doon 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 and take your money
in the club.
And the song is about American viewpoints on immigrants and how Americans inherently believe that immigrants are running around shooting guns and taking your money. And like, this is literally based on her life experience of coming over here and immediately having people be afraid of her. And like, she's a great person to read the interviews of. She's extremely passionate. But I mean, she would go on to talk about, like, especially with this song, like, she comes over here and, you know, in places like New York, like, immigrants are driving cabs for 20 hours a day.
Yep.
All they want to do is go home to their family, sleep for 4 hours, and then go back to work. They don't have any time and take your money. Like, you know, and it's such a great example, I think, too, of like our tendency, and this is really obvious in this moment in 2020, our tendency to cartoonize points that are satirical, to where we've like created this abstraction where we don't understand anything. And to me, like, taking down Confederate statues is a great example. Like, we've created this cartoonized version where we're going to forget history, as if statues are the only way that we remember anything. Like, it doesn't even withstand a gentle poke of logic. Like, no one goes to statue locations to go, oh, the Civil War!
Our Secretary of Education has no books in her house, and that's how most people would remember history. So, you know, I don't know.
She has private books in her class. She got them with vouchers.
I'm sure there's a podcast episode on Breitbart that's like, books are gay. In which case, I'd like a boyfriend.
Exactly. So yeah, so to me, that's why Paper Planes was worth sticking in here, because even though it's such a tonal shift from some of the other songs, it still has that layer of like, are you listening to what people are telling you about their experience? Because the lived experience is dramatically different than the story that we tell to one another.
And the other fun thing about the song is when she does go into the actual rapping, because I forgot there was anything but a chorus in this song, to be honest. But it's a pretty long song.
Yeah.
It's also trivialized maybe a little because it was in Pineapple Express or in the trailer, and that was so goofy. But all the lyrics are like tough guy 90s gangster rap type lyrics about like sipping perp and rolling on rims, and she just like took all those tropes and coming out of the vehicle that is M.I.A., who is like not a large person. She cuts an imposing kind of aura, but like objectively is small and seems harmless. But like kind of adopting that posture, you realize how ridiculous it is to be afraid of like dope stories and like storytelling, and kind of reminds me of when Empire was on the air and I was like, what is this and why does this exist? And somebody was like, Black people deserve to have all kinds of stories told, even if they're bad. Like, they don't all have to swing for the fences and be Moonlight and whatever. So it's moments like this with M.I.A. where you just realize how ridiculously monocultural like white America has tried to make the world, and frankly so boring. But she's so multifaceted and interesting.
Yeah.
And the sample's a hell of a Clash song, and just is kind of, I don't know, it felt, I think 13 years or whatever on, it's easy to forget how different and refreshing it felt. You know how we used to like kind of ghettoize world music, and it was like, if it's not from here, it's from there. But it had that kind of like, oh, is world music going to be part of American pop now? Are we going to be multi-ethnic and multicultural? And are we going to finally sound like the country you walk around in actually looks? And thankfully with Gen Z, that's a lot less of a thing than it was. But for anyone who's 10 years younger than us, who stumbles across this podcast, I want to remark on like how far the mindset around that has come in a very short time.
Yeah.
Thanks to artists like M.I.A.
Totally. Now you can talk about Bob Dylan, because I have trouble.
Yeah, so I'm not like the biggest Dylan fan. I wouldn't even say I'm like really a Dylan fan per se, but I have my moments with Dylan where like I love the idea of Dylan. Like, super radically progressive guy, just fearlessly weird his whole career, never gave a shit about what he was supposed to do. On paper, I love everything about Bob Dylan.
There we go.
When we get into the music, that's when I'm like, all right, this one's not necessarily for me. But like Highway 61 Revisited is one of my favorites. Dylan is one of those who a lot of the people whose music I intersect with a lot love Dylan. Like our buddy Brian Steely, one of my favorite people to talk music with and go to shows with and all that. Huge Dylan fan. Nashville Skyline, Blonde on Blonde, all that. This song, lyrically, is still one of the high watermark protest songs for me.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't hear the Dylan version first. I heard the Anika version first, like a dub reggae version of this song, which I think is a very cool way to get radical leftist ideology, because reggae seems so cool and chill and like white trust fund kids love it. And then you realize they're like talking about poverty and like imperialism and all of that sort of stuff, and they do it in like a really cool slangy way that like we could never get away with, but because it's so cool it like makes you want to be all in with it. But I just want to read the last two there are 8 verses in this song, and I just want to read the last two real quick. So it is about, you know, exactly what the title implies, like the warmongers of the world who profit off of war, profit off the prison industrial complex, who have found a way to atomize the darkest possible things that humans can do, which takes it an even lower circle into Dante's Inferno. Like, this is for the people who are in the mouth of the beast in the ice cavern getting chewed for all of eternity. And I think that's the point that Dylan's trying to make. So he says, let me ask you one question. Is your money that good? Will it buy you forgiveness? Do you think that it could? It's like a dark Dr. Seuss rhyme. I think you will find when your death takes its toll, all the money you made will never buy back your soul. And I hope that you die and your death will come soon. I will follow your casket by the pale afternoon. I'm getting psyched just reading it. And I'll watch while you're lowered down to your deathbed, and I'll stand over your grave till I'm sure that you're dead. Flick cigarette into open hole. Like, that's more metal than any metal song I have ever heard in my life. And it gets me super pumped. And he does a really good job of, like, sometimes there's more instrumentation in some of his records, but like this is just the guitar and you hear the attack on the acoustic. Like he's playing the hell out of the thing. Yep. Like he's wearing a hole over the pick guard, and he's singing. You can hear the bile and the venom out of the corners of his mouth. And it's such a raw and real and stripped back performance that I hope that all of you, fourth wall, will take a minute to listen to it really loud with headphones, because genre-wise, it's not the kind of music that would invite that necessarily.
Yeah.
It's kind of passive sonically, but it's super punk, and I think it demands that you like let it cut through the middle of your body like a laser, because it goes hard.
To me, it was that, obviously that last verse, but the thing it stirs in me is the reminder that as much as I would like to believe that everyone and everything is redeemable within this lifetime, it is not.
It is not.
It is not. And things and people will need to die for systems to break. We can rebuild some of them, but some of them will persist as long as people are alive who choose to make them persist. And I think this song, along with one or two others, is a nice reminder that there's really no way around that. There's no Cracker Barrel gift shop version of revolutionary change.
Which takes us into the next song, which we both love a lot, which also, the takeaway is, at the end of your life, Satan will laugh and spread his wings and cover you. It's also a hell of a karaoke song, honestly. Like, if you're hanging around the right group of people and the whiskey is flowing, certainly if you're in a neighborhood like East Atlanta, you put on the very beginning of War Pigs, and it's immediate. And you hear the siren, the air raid siren to start, and it's scarier than the song Black Sabbath to me, because it is about a very real thing. It's not about a demon or a ghost or whatever. It's about real evil in the world. But man, if it ain't catchy.
My favorite trivia about this that drives home the point to me is that War Pigs wasn't specifically written to be about war. It was originally called Walpurgis, which was described by Geezer Butler as Christmas for Satanists. But my favorite part is they're writing a song and they're talking about, he said, war was the big Satan. That was the entire part, that was the entire point of the song. It wasn't about politics or government or anything. So just map this chronologically with me. They write a song about Satan. War is Satan. War is evil itself. Then the record company says, could you make this about the world? They changed none of the lyrics, and it's about the world. I'm sure everyone has their opportunities in life. We were in school when 9/11 happened, and I would argue that, at least for me,
Just walking into Spanish class when I saw the plane hit the second tower.
The war that took place after that was like my personal great awakening. Because you start asking...
Because of Green Day, obviously.
Natch.
Yeah.
But you start asking questions like, hold on, we're fighting who and why? And for how long? And what are we doing? And how many people died?
An idea.
Yeah. And it was also one of my first moments where it's like, I thought I grew up with this idea that war was in fact evil. I read it in all of the religion books.
But the unquestionable assumption that you can't even question out loud, and I say this as the grandson of a veteran, is war is a necessary evil.
Right.
Sure, it's bad.
Right.
Yeah, people die, but they're poor kids. Who gives a shit? And they die by the fistful. Whatever. We need to do this. Our enemy is abroad. There are so many movies and books and whatever about how rhetoric shapes reality around war, which props up a multi-billion-dollar industry. So we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but if you're even remotely interested in gaining a little bit of vocabulary around that, that's a thing that you should study.
Yep.
But this was the first time that I remember being like, yeah, war's bad and there's no reason for it. And Dad, I know you're proud of your dad, but he shouldn't have gone to Vietnam. There was no reason that he should have been there and missed those years of your life to get money for the imperialist empire abroad.
Yep.
And on top of that, and on top of war being bad. You like the 201 of that class is that you learn that America, like, with the exception of the Axis powers in the 30s or whatever, but that arguably came out of a void we created after the First World War. Like, we're the aggressor with almost all of it, and we're trying to advance our capitalist causes, and we destabilize all these, and they don't teach you any of that. The assumption is like, war is evil, but it's necessary.
So it's not.
So
let's cut to the song.
Still pissed about it.
Yeah, so that was a super dense block. So yeah, cut to these songs, and this is a great block to listen to back to back, like you said, headphones,
loud,
get in there, yeah, and just listen to the different things that this can draw out.
And then take a water break and take a deep breath. Yeah. We'll see you on the other side.